Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a motion to resume the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight. If everybody could please just sign in at the sign-in sheet if you haven't had a chance to do so already. Just by a little bit of background before we open it up to the floor for any comments. Our first public hearing session on this particular draft of the law, which is revised, was held on, April 11th. We had our SECRA Part 2 review on April 29th, where the board reviewed and discussed the Part 2 in its entirety. We formulated answers to the questions. We asked the consultants to revise the Part 2 per the board's discussion, and we directed the preparation of a draft Part 3 and negative declaration for the board to consider. We received correspondence from the county indicating they have no additional comments on this law and that it's a matter of local concern. We received comments from the Village of Millbrook, which we'll discuss later in the meeting. And just to remind everyone that a public hearing is really our opportunity to listen, to hear your comments and to hear your questions. It's not a debate. We will not be going back and forth. We'll simply take down your comments, take your questions, and then when we decide at the end of the meeting to deliberate, we'll take them all under consideration. So with that, please, come up and introduce yourself and use the microphone if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Sure.
So I would like to be supportive of the board, but I'm having a really hard time at the end of the day doing so. I've been following these discussions on Zoom for 3 years. I own a property here, and I'm very concerned I have a farm, but I am very concerned about the whole development situation here and what's going to happen to our land as it gets subdivided. So here's what I think I've learned listening to the Zoom meetings. Overlays are a bad idea because they can be duplicated in other parts of the town. This overlay opens up residential zoned areas in 1, 2, and 5 zone acres for more development of inns. And the Friends of the Town of Washington's video that's on their website it tells you exactly how an overlay can be duplicated across the town. So I would encourage everyone to look at that video and see what they said about Migdale and the risk it was that it could be duplicated. It seems a better path would be to revise the zoning code. The consultants and others told you that was the better path, but the path was not pursued because it takes longer and there were people waiting to present their plans. Okay. So the overlay was designed with specific terminology and sites which have real issues. Several times the board asked the consultant to confirm, is this spot zoning? The consultant confirmed it's not spot zoning because it's supported by the hospitality plan addendum. I think a challenger can make the case that it is spot zoning, which is illegal. Spot zoning occurs when property is rezoned for the owner who benefits to a greater extent than the townwide community. A lawyer against Migdale wrote the following about spot zoning. The state courts determine instances of spot zoning on a case-by-case basis. There is a well-set test which has been established by precedent. In evaluating a particular zoning amendment, the courts will consider the following factors. A, whether the amendment is in harmony with the municipality's comprehensive plan. B, whether it is compatible with the surrounding land uses. C, the likelihood of harm to surrounding properties. D, the availability of other parcels. And E, the recommendation of professional staff. Your goal seems to be to get the overlay in place first before plans are presented to the planning board, so it will look less like spot zoning. But these plans, these sites are designed specifically for people waiting to present plans. The whole approach seems backwards to me, but I am no expert in zoning law. But I think it might be on purpose. Why don't you just let the people present their plans first? This would seem like a more traditional approach. I don't need to tell you, 2 of these properties on the aquifer, subject to flooding, one is non-conforming, hadn't been used for a while. Neighbors are concerned about 2 properties. 2 of the buildings need to be repurposed, or to be repurposed, look like they're falling down, could never be repurposed. We could have empty red circles on our zoning map if you approve this overlay. Do we need more inns? Okay. 13% of the town responded to the survey on hospitality. And with that limited input, the board amended our comprehensive plan. Then, in an effort to show a win for its work, they recommended this overlay. My boots on the ground market research has led me to conclude we do not need 3 inns. Here's an example. The Millbrook Inn, which has a Millbrook address, but is actually in Burbank on Cambry Road, has 9 rooms, 24 parking places, a terrific restaurant open 4 nights a week, and it's in a beautiful setting. It feels like it belongs there. The business is okay, but they're not turning away customers. It's seasonal. It's busier in the summer and the fall. The customers tend to be exactly who you would think they would be. People who once lived here, people who are coming back to see family. I think short-term rentals are replacing the need for inns. I think we solved the need for hospitality here for the short term, and we clearly don't need to pass this overlay right now. Thank you.
No.
Thank you. Could we just have your name?
Lisa Brown,
And where do you live, Lisa?
40 Windy Hill Road, Millbrook, New York.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Any other
No other
comments?
comments?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay.
Where you have designated on this, environmental form, I'm Fletcher Coddington, I'm part of Swanee Millbrook, New York. I'm a long-term resident, and I personally have memory of the water in Washington Hollow coming all the way to the edge of the old Cottonwood building in 1955. And here it states that it's out of the 500-year floodplain. That's not true. It's not out of the 100-year floodplain. Hurricane Carol did dump 24 inches of rain in 12 hours. But with the current climate situation, that's becoming more and more and more probable. So I think that this environmental assessment form has errors in it. And I'd like to see it reviewed by somebody that is certified to do such things, because the information isn't correct. Thank you.
Anyone else?
You're already up. You're already up.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Paul Schwartz. I'm a resident at 1316 Chestnut Ridge Road. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a resident for 28 years and I have multiple businesses in the town. My interest, like many, is maintaining, preserving what is here. 4 of the board members have been here most of their lives. They've seen changes in their lives that hopefully won't continue on, but progress will make change, and change is necessary. Just to be clear, I'm a strong proponent of the development to former Cottonwood sites. The situation there is really beyond resolution any other way. I think that the Marcel family is definitely the group to undertake this. I think that they have the backing, the understanding, and the expertise to manage the problems that are there. And as has been mentioned, there are problems. Water, both above the ground and below the ground, are a problem there. I think that what needs to be undertaken is a full examination of the conditions at all these properties. I think that given my background and my work for the town, it is plain and clear that when situations arise like this, we call on the consultants that the town has used for at least 2 decades to make determinations and not rely on the representations of those that probably don't have the expertise to make such representations. As such, I think that the secret review should be, the secret situation should be reviewed by Steve Marino from an environmental perspective. Steve served the planning board on multiple projects where there need to be consideration of environmental impact. And quite frankly, a planner is not the right person to do that evaluation. Water. We, as everyone is aware, have hydrology issues in this town. There are wells here, myself included, that are 700 to 1,000 feet down. Those are deep wells. And for those of us who've been here for more than a decade, we all realize that in periods of drought, people are fracking, people are digging new wells, and it's expensive. The last time I had to go do a well, I couldn't believe what the current cost is. And so there's a financial consideration as well as a resource consumption consideration. We're talking about restaurants. That's a huge user of water, not for serving people, but for washing dishes. We're talking about spas. Every user of a spa is going to take a shower. They're going to take a steam. They're going to do whatever else is necessary to meet their needs. Those are huge users of water. And the comment was made at one point that the aquifer is not associated with the aquifer with the village. It's my contention that if you have a puddle of water, regardless of which end of the puddle you're taking water from, the water level goes down. And when the water level goes down, you can ask Californians, so does the ground. And these things need to be evaluated by hydrologists. Chase and Company has been the town's consultant when it comes to hydrology. This board should engage Chazen to review the water utilization prior to any action being taken by the board. Traffic. I'm not sure if any of you have driven to pick up somebody from the train in Poughkeepsie lately, but I'll tell you, the other night, it took me an extra half an hour sitting at the Adams light and the Eastdale light. And I watched that light turn red, green, red, green, red, green multiple times as I crept along. You're talking about whatever number of rooms, whatever number of restaurant seats, and whatever number of spa utilization in a distance of 2.5 miles. As anybody here knows, if you're trying to make a left turn from what used to be 44A and now it's called 44 onto what used to be called 44, now it's called 4482, you try to make a left turn there coming out of Washington Hollow at the wrong time, you're sitting there for a while. That doesn't include any of the utilization that's going to be happening at dinner time for restaurants and the sheer number of people if they come. Lisa Brown made a comment. We have a hard time supporting 3 restaurants. What are we going to do with 3 more? And who's going to carry the cost when these things don't do well? You're putting the cart before the horse. And while I do believe that real estate will benefit from more people and the village will benefit from more traffic, I think there's reasonable and unreasonable. I saw the mock-up that was distributed of 3 specific sites. That's the definition of spot zoning. You have not created a new zoning region. You're using this overlay in a spot zoning format. Going back to the original overlay conversation 3 years ago, I was against it then as I am now. I've had conversations with the board.
I'm sorry.
Okay, if you let, okay, Mr. Heaney, okay, Mr. Heaney, you of all people, okay, you of all people shouldn't be making a comment because you, sir, okay, you, sir, let's not get into that. Correct. Okay. So, Mr. Heaney, no, I was against overlay when it was first brought up by Mr. Mackey, and many people in this room are aware of it. I was in favor of a rezone. Rezone is not overlay. Okay. To be clear, the legal support on the overlay is a single case that Yorktown Heights, where they were challenged on their overlay. They were challenged based upon their seeker review, and the issue was about historical significance. So they lost, Yorktown Heights won. They prevailed because it was felt by the court, and this is the preliminary stage of the court. It never went to appeal, that their evaluation of historical significance was appropriate. We're not talking historical significance. We're talking traffic. We're talking water. We're talking major impacts here. And so I would implore the board to engage the consultants, get their evaluations, hold the public hearing open, and then move forward. I would also suggest that a rezone of South Road and 44 up to 44A, 4482 would be more appropriate. We have commercial there. It would be appropriate to put commercial there, and it would not be spot rezoning. In addition, Gary, you are familiar when we met 5 years ago at the Silverstone property. The Silverstone property, which is at that junction, had proposed putting in a farm-to-table restaurant and an inn. And it was determined at that time by their consultants that it would be necessary to put a light right there. So what are we going to do? We're going to put a light there. We're going to put a light at the Cottonwood. We're going to put a light at the traffic circle. I mean, this whole thing is just so unbalanced. And I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you, Andrew, as I've offered to have a conversation with your wife and Gary Safari, and I've been refused 3 times. So if you'd like to talk about it in public, I'd love to. If you'd like to talk about it in private, I welcome it. But whatever would suit you would be fine with
I think
me.
it's important you address the board.
Okay,
This is
that's
not-
fine.
This is not a
Paul,
dialogue
If,
for
if
everybody
we
in
could
this room.
kind of like wrap it up, we could have somebody.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me just say, it would be a good idea to support this with good, strong data, not just opinions. Okay?
Anyone else? Lisa, you wanted to get up?
I was just going to make a comment. So I'm Elizabeth Logan Badavale, Lemon Nine Partners in the Village of Millbrook. Town's right across the street, depending on where you live in the town. Anyway, this one particular, the old Daytop property, I was in the meetings when, after years of failing septic system, the board went back and did a site visit. And I remember sitting in the meeting and them talking about wading through excrement. And they couldn't believe that they went onto the site and it was in such a condition. It wasn't long after that that the whole, everything shut down, everything ceased and so forth. I think that there's accumulated knowledge of what has gone on in those properties, the long-term problems that are associated with them, certainly with Cottonwood as well. And I just wish that some of that knowledge seemed to be better utilized during this process to point out some of these things that we know about. Additionally, I would say that the village water is something that should be protected at all costs. When the ash plant was proposed years ago, and it was recommended at that time, Mary Tyler Moore, I guess, spearheaded that, that the town do everything they could to zone and make sure that everything on top of the aquifer, and there were specific properties listed, that every effort go into making sure that they were preserved so that the security of the water source for the Village of Millbrook residents was done. And since then, there hasn't been traction, and it's been decades. So I just think all of these things should come in. You're talking about, you hooked up one of these properties as hookup, but not to the use, that's my understanding, that's been determined. And all of these things really bear discussion, and I don't feel through this process that that's evident, that this historical knowledge of these properties and some of the problems that have existed on them. That makes any sense? Am I being clear?
I understand.
I'm
Yep.
trying to be clear. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim Colopy, Mayor of the Village of Millbrook. And as you know, the village board has taken a position that we recommend that the one overlay at the corner of 343 and Halcyon be removed because of a list of concerns the village board has. And I want to follow up, Leslie said that the village board would get a response. I'm hoping I can,
Yes, we're talking about that during the environmental review.
okay, fine. So the village will get a response to that request.
Yeah, no, we're going to respond to your comments that you made.
Okay, fine. Good, I appreciate that. Thanks.
But if you have further comments, Tim, you should make them now if you
No,
want
it's
to have it
fine.
on the record. Okay.
Kevin?
Anyone else, Kevin?
Hello, Kevin Berg. I live on 85 College Lane. A little nervous. I'm 67. I've lived there my entire life. My father, my grandfather, great-grandfather, all from Millbrook. And I represent a bunch of people from College Lane. And we're very nervous about what's going to happen to us, how it's going to change our neighborhood, the effect it's going to have, cars coming up and down, trucks, employees, even the water. So, and we've been assured that nobody's going to use College Lane, but how do we even know that? So that's one of our concerns, and I've got a lot of neighbors here all wondering the same thing. So that's our concern.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Kevin.
much.
Yep.
Anyone else?
The meeting
Oh, hi,
was
Heather.
on
Do you
343,
want to- We can hear you.
and I just,
People on Zoom.
Oh, yes. do you
Yeah,
mind?
the
That's what
Zoom
this is,
people
Zoom
might not be
people
able to
can
hear you.
my concern is the traffic on 343 and 44. I really think you see most people are going to access or exit egress or onto that road. And it will look very much like the new development down by Adams. It'll be gridlock. It already is, and we have huge trucks that barrel down to Dover Plains to the plant, the burn plant down there. And I just think that there has to be more thought on how the flow, the transportation flow. I mean, I don't see how you know that it's going to have minimal impact on the highways because they all exit onto the same road.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Robert Tompkins. I live up on College Lane. And one of the impacts I'm concerned about for you and my neighbors, you start looking at some of your documents, you said, you're going to be looking for water for the 100 rooms or 40 rooms that you intend to put up there. What happens if you do find water and there's so little up there that it draws down all the wells where others don't have the water? Do we come to you guys and say, well, what do you do for water? You tell me to go get a, bottle of water and drink it or something. So you have to consider some of these impacts that we have. At the same time, I've lived there with Daytop, and where I live up on top of the hill, there's the smells from the cooking environments, the noise, the lighting. everything plays a role. And now we have a rural environment. And now we're talking about turning it into, a more commercial environment, which has certain impacts that makes the living there not as nice as it is today. So I hope that you take all this into consideration for me and my neighbors. And on top of all of it, talking to some real estate folks, they think if that moves in there, you'll be devaluating people's properties throughout the area there. And with that said, how would you address if everybody finds out that their property is worth about 20 or 30% less money than it is today? How would you rectify that? So these are all things, when the thing is all said and done, you may be opening up Pandora's box to some legal activity. I'd like to see where this goes first a little bit before we go deeper into this thing and find out where we're coming from and who's making these decisions. So everything I hope you heard here tonight, including myself, you take into some serious consideration. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I have a question, actually. I apologize in advance for not being super familiar with this. People have been talking about spot zoning versus hospitality overlay. Can you just explain briefly for those of us who are not familiar, is spot zoning akin to a minor modification to zoning?
No, and I would, I don't know, Nan or Jim, would you mind addressing the question of spot zoning? I was going to talk about it more in our remarks, but since there's a direct question from a resident, would you mind giving a little overview of why this is not in fact spot zoning? We were not advised, contrary to earlier comment, to change the code, and how overlays work.
Well, this is Jim, and I can certainly.
Jim, I can't hear you. Sorry. Just 1 second. Let us get the.
Just let me know when you are ready.
Hear you. Maybe your volume button, Nan. Do you? Maybe if you're able to. I know that
She looks muted.
you're muted.
Jim is not, but I think maybe is the volume up in
Or would you? I don't have your. I can give you my cell phone number. You can call my cell phone. I can put you on speaker if we're still having trouble. Does it work?
He's not muted.
You're not muted.
What about Nan? Is she?
Nan, can you take your mute off, Nan, and see if it's just Jim or is it everybody?
I can hear Jim.
Yes.
Oh, maybe it's the television volume.
No, he was.
He's muted now.
Now you're muted.
I think it's
Okay, I'm gonna,
Anything now?
I can hear you, but barely, which is.
If there's someone-
Let
my
me
mic
see you in the
on?
call, Jim, by cell phone. I'll email it to you and then I can put you on speaker if that works.
Let me just go into my mic and see if I can up the volume somehow. I'm not
Can't
sure.
hear you, Jim. Hold on.
Okay,
Oh, the Zoom people can hear, but apparently the people in the room can't hear. So I just got a text from someone that's on Zoom.
the volume on that, yeah.
Anyone good with technology? No.
There isn't a volume.
I feel like that remote doesn't work.
The remote's down there. Yes.
Is the television output into your mix going into a mixing desk? The outwire from the television.
I mean, you're able to hear them clear last time. Why?
I don't know. I'm just gonna put them on speaker.
So it's not, the audio isn't routed through the main speakers.
That's helping. That's helping. Just heard someone.
There we go.
Ah.
Good job.
Oh, thank you. Takes a village or
Try
takes
now,
a town,
Jim.
as they say.
And I've just turned can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We're just gonna get you all the way up.
Okay, I just turned I just turned my own mic volume all the way down. So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
A little louder.
Oh, I'll say on spot zoning, there's often getting some feedback, but spot zoning, there's often misconception about spot zoning that if zoning affects only certain parcels and not others, that it is therefore spot zoning, and that's just legally incorrect. Let me ask if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
So that's just legally incorrect. In fact, the standard that somebody enunciated earlier about spot zoning is actually fairly correct. The law of spot zoning is actually quite simple. If the zoning is supported by a reasoned, thought-out planning analysis, it's not spot zoning. That's what the leading case is the New York Tarrytown case. And it kind of puts the lie to the notion that because zoning may only affect certain properties and not others, even immediately surrounding it, that's somehow automatically spot zoning. That's simply incorrect. If zoning is supported by reasoned planning analysis, and here you've had a multi-year process with a change to your master plan and so forth, every case I've read on spot zoning, I think I've read most of them, concludes that it's not spot zoning. So that's the legalities of spot zoning. And certainly overlay districts are not by their nature spot zonings. Overlays are a very common zoning technique throughout certainly New York and this region. And they've certainly been upheld. And, nothing makes me think as a zoning lawyer that because zoning is part of a regime of overlay, that it is therefore spot zoning. That's just not right. So that's what I can say from a legal standpoint.
Thank you, Jim. And Nan, I thought you had a great description at our last public hearing where this issue was raised about how overlays work and the fact that, just because you're applying an overlay doesn't in any way retract or remove any of the existing regulations and code. It just simply adds another layer. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the original statements also was that revising zoning is a better pathway to accomplishing the goals. But this is a revision to the zoning. Creating this overlay is a zoning change. That's what this local law is proposing to do, is to actually change the zoning. But the overlay works by creating another layer of regulations on top of all of the other layers of regulations. So this doesn't undo anything. This doesn't change any rules for water, sewer, traffic, wetlands, floodplains, the aquifer. None of that gets changed. This adds on basically another layer that adds an additional allowed use. So there are already a lot of uses allowed in those districts from being a residential use. You can have residences, and there were other things on the use table. So this adds another permissible use with a special use permit on top of everything else. So the overlay, as Jim said, which is commonly used for a lot of reasons, in a lot of situations, it's very similar to many communities have a historic district overlay, which is an added layer to get at historic districts or historic structures. So I don't think we should think about this as ignoring or taking away any of the other environmental or community character protections that the underlying zoning has, because those all still remain in place. So I don't know if that captured what I had said the last meeting or not, but that's
I think that's helpful, and I hope that answered. Yeah, thank you, Nan. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. Do you have any other comments?
I was actually just trying to get the distinction between what just a modification to the zoning is, and it sounds like the overlay is a minor modification to.
It's not a change in any of the existing code. It's just adding an addition. It's adding actually more regulation on top of those areas, because right now you could actually apply
So it is not a change of use.
Well, no, it's allowing a hospitality use in those areas.
I apologize for this addition. I just want to be clear, Nan. So typically, overlays create greater restriction on a zoning parcel. Things like historical, ag, aquifer. They limit use to preserve the underlying resource, whether it be aesthetic or otherwise. This actually isn't another layer putting greater restriction. This is opening up to remove a portion of the restriction that our code has on those parcels. So just to be clear, it's not adding, it's in essence relaxing.
That is actually, that's not our understanding, actually, from our lawyer, Jim, because that issue was raised at the last meeting. Anyway, we're not having a debate, as I said. Okay, anyone else have a comment? Any other comments?
Hi, I'm Susan Mancuso, 160 Church Street. And I just kind of want to go back to the big picture about what this law is all about. Months ago, the question was asked, who is this law for? I mean, who benefits from this? And what's the demand for it? When you guys went through your hospitality surveys, people expressed some support for limited hospitality use, which was defined as being like 4 to 10 rooms. And in fact, during one of the hearings that happened when the comprehensive plan committee was holding hearings, Nan Stolzenberg made the comment when you guys were reviewing the economic study about, somebody asked like, well, why did you come up with 20 rooms to base your economic study on? And what she said was, that was kind of the tipping point. It was because about a third of the people supported 20 rooms, about a third of the people kind of supported 20 rooms, and a third of the people were against 20 rooms. So there's been no great desire for 20-room hotels, and there certainly has been none for 40 rooms. And I think you can tell from the public here that those uses are not just minor uses. So it's not a minor rezone, it's a major, major impact. I think that tonight, if I understand, you guys have scheduled a special meeting, and I think your plan is to do a negative declaration, is that correct? And then to adopt the law, is that correct? Yeah, okay. So
We're here to deliberate and discuss, but we're not, as we said, we're here to listen and take comments and questions. We're not here.
well, I'm glad to hear that, because I would really strongly urge that this board do not adopt a negative declaration. In reviewing your FEAF, it's just riddled with errors. And so if you use those facts contained in that FEAF to make your determination that there are no environmental impacts, it's a gross error. These statements that you have about the the environmental conditions they're wrong in so many places. And the problem, besides the fact that they're wrong, is that they seem skewed in one direction to either minimize or not indicate that certain conditions exist. For example, your FEAF, your environmental assessment, says that there's no wetlands on these sites. That's simply not true. I mean, the Cottonwood is obvious. The other site, the Bennett site, there's a stream going through that's been well noted. And so that's just wrong. Your FEAF says that there are no flood zones. That's totally wrong. I mean, FEMA says that there's flood zones, so you should acknowledge that. In fact, the Cottonwood is in a special hazard zone A. So that's wrong. Steep slopes. You say that the steep slopes are between 10 and 15%. Steep slopes, per your NRI, say that these are some of the most sensitive environmental features. Among the reasons for that are that there can be erosion, there could be septic issues, there are species that make, like rare species like the timber rattlesnake, that make those kind of habitats there, where they live. So you said that there's a maximum 10% of steep slopes. And by the way, 15% is kind of like the cutoff where a steep slope is considered steep and therefore should be considered in environmental terms as to what the implications would be. But in fact, if you look at Daytop, for example, and I mean, anybody can see it just visually, is the steep slopes there are between, a good chunk of it, between 20 and 40%. And there's some that go between 40 and 80%. So you could get that information if you just look at your own NRI, it's right there. And so these have implications. As Ms. Baravalli indicated, that has some impacts for what's going on over Daytop. The whole septic issue, I mean, that goes to the question of whether this is a suitable site, whether it can handle the 40-room hotel. I found the Millbrook Roundtable, I'm sure people remember that from way back when. There's an article from 1988 where the county came to the village and appeared before who was Mayor Safari at that point. And because at that point, Daytop was looking to hook into the village sewer system. And that county official said that if they didn't have an existing permit right now, they wouldn't have given it to them. It can't function, and it's because of the soils. And as a result of that, they would not do anything that would allow them to expand that use. So that's one aspect of Daytop. Another aspect is water. Where does Daytop get its water from? They can't support the water. They don't have a water supply on site. And the town doesn't, as we all know, doesn't provide an infrastructure. So what Daytop does is they're siphoning their water from a federally designated wetland or they were, when they were operating, that's almost a half mile away. That site is, I don't think this is permitted under your wetlands law, but, and then in order to get it up the hill, they have a pump house. So nobody's mentioned that, and that pump house is not included in your environmental review. The pump house is this tiny little lot that has no street frontage. It's none of your bulk or use requirements. So they get the water, they siphon it into a cistern that's located inside the pump house, and it gets pumped up the hill under pipes that are probably under the properties of some of the people that live here, and they may not even know it. So who knows if there's even easements that have been properly drawn up. But so this site, in all likelihood, cannot sustain a 40-room hotel with all the other elements, the restaurant and the spa and all that. And you guys haven't even mentioned that in your FEAF. You haven't. And with regard to the Cottonwood, in addition to it's got the floodplain and the wetlands and the stream, it floods regularly. It's a problem. The soils, it's on top of an aquifer, and the soils have been misstated on your FEAF. You say that the soils on all these properties are in hydrologic class B. Well, they're not. In the case of the Cottonwood, I think it's called Hoosick gravelly loam. which is an extremely permeable soil. And it's good for some things. It's good for recharging the aquifer because the water gets down there real fast. But that also makes it a really bad thing when you're building on it. Because if you're relying on that same soil to do your wastewater management, it can't sufficiently filter the water. So that untreated water goes pouring through the aquifer, and that water is used as drinking water for the town and for all the communities that are downstream from us that are in the Wappingers Creek watershed. You've got that same problem at Bennett too. They have the exact same soils that have been misstated on your FEAF. And that has not been evaluated at all as to whether you can just simply build on those. So you also have not determined what the build out would look like for these properties. You talked about the current traffic. You see there's a lot of concern for traffic. Here you just made conclusory statements based with no expertise on what the traffic might be. That's really what's required. You talk about these sites, and I'm referring to Cottonwood and Daytop as being already developed. And that therefore somehow the fact that they're already developed with what? I mean, who knows, but that they're already developed means that they're suitable for a 40-room hotel. I mean, that's a big leap in logic. And you have to show people what this build out would look like. What is the water consumption going to be? What's the water demand? What kind of runoff will there be from stormwater? What kind of like waste discharge will there be from all the guests, from the spa users, from any other, from the fitness gym, from the bar, from the pool? All those things have to be evaluated. And you guys haven't even scratched the surface on this.
So Susan, could you sum it up?
Okay,
There's other people.
of course, I understand. So my,
And we received your letter as well.
And
so let me
that'll be
sum.
entered into the minutes as well.
So let me sum up, please.
Yeah.
Is that you are not in a position to make a declaration of environmental significance, certainly not a declaration of negative significance. If you make a declaration of positive significance, and that's really what your public is asking you to do, then you can do the studies that are needed to ascertain whether this is what the problems are with these sites and whether they actually can be developed in the way that you're proposing. The other thing I would mention is that you should be following the aquifer law, not pawning it off on the planning board. This board is a rezone. Aquifers, if an aquifer is being rezoned, the party that's doing the action, the town board, has to review this in the context of the aquifer protection law. And one of the things that aquifer protection law says is that there cannot be more than 5 feet between the water table and the ground, the surface ground. Well, if you look at the Cottonwood site, they don't have 5 feet between that and the stream. I mean, this stuff has to be evaluated because you could be creating a very, very serious environmental issue. I haven't even addressed the species issues. There's like 170 species, or I should say, almost all the species that are listed in your NRI as threatened or of concern. Almost all of them, the birds I'm talking about, can be found in the Kerry Lowlands, which is directly behind your site. So I do not think that this is ready for a negative declaration. I think you guys have to take another look at this because there are so many errors and omissions in your FEAF that any finding you make based on that will be very defective. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Anyone else? last call. Anyone?
I guess someone on Zoom.
Oh, someone
no.
else. Sorry.
Ethel, Town of Washington. I just want to say the communication has been terrible. Had I not seen signs that said 100 rooms and been curious, I don't even know who that is or where it's coming from.
Exactly.
And I feel like I don't know how to find out what's going on. Will we, as taxpayers, get to vote on this declaration, or you
No.
just make the decision?
Right.
I feel like enough people do not know about what's going on, and I don't even know where to look for it. So
Did you
that's
look on
all.
our website?
No, I did not. But how would I know that it was even there had there not been a sign saying 100 rooms on the side of the road? I wouldn't even know that something this important, and it is important, that was getting decided upon. So.
Okay.
Anyone?
Hi, everybody. Andrew Heaney, resident. Yeah, I just want to address the last comment is just that this has been going on for 3 years. I mean, this meeting is the culmination of 3 years of first grappling with the Migdale project, which I'm not going to relitigate that right now, but in my opinion, my humble opinion, that was a true potential ecological disaster. And there's a lot of people that stood up here arguing against this proposal who did nothing but work all day and all night scheming to try to make that proposal take place. So that is ironic to me, but nevertheless, the bottom line is that, you know, it sounds like everyone's getting up and saying that the board has done a defective job, but basically all they're doing is exactly what we asked them to do. You know, there was a poll, we participated, 13%, I don't know if any of you have ever done a mailer or, you know, for a response from people, but 13% is an incredible statistical participation rate.
Would you make a business decision?
I absolutely would. Yeah, absolutely I would. That's the same, but that's the same, but you know what though, you know it's,
Actually, we're not getting into.
okay, but
We're not debating.
okay, but I'm just going to answer the question, is that's the same argument Will Guidara gave in favor of Migdal, because the conclusion of that was that Migdal was not allowed. He said, well, there's not enough people participated, right? But that was proven, you know, math, it's math. So if you're a fan of math, it's a very statistically significant sample. So, okay, all right, just ask if you're a fan.
This is not, we have to stick with just comments.
Okay,
not
fair enough.
with
What I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of the comments, and I'm not an expert as many in this room pretend to be, but my understanding is that what is going to happen at this point is that there are no proposals right now. You know, you mentioned the Cottonwood.
Can't let you say things like that.
I can certainly say that there are no proposals in front of the town right now.
Officially none.
Well, then you have special information that I don't have.
Okay, guys, this is not,
Okay.
I
Okay.
think maybe it's better that you speak to the board.
I'm
and I think
being spoken to by this citizen. I'm
Everyone
not
else-
doing anything.
Like, please let Mr. Heaney speak. He let you, and so give him his fair. We want to hear what.
Yeah,
Just
so
like everybody else.
I'm just making
Okay.
a simple point, is that we have a planning board, you know, and the planning board is there to protect us. And the bottom line is that what the board is doing today is basically acting upon something that a very large number, in fact, the majority of the people that responded asked for, and that's what they're doing. And so I'm just a little confused at some of the comments, because it seems like you're asking them to predict the future and to know what these projects are before the projects have been presented to them. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
On Zoom, do you have, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Name?
Yeah, I don't think, this might not be the place to say it, but I have it on very good authority that property, the Migdale property was bought 2 days ago, Friday, by a developer from Chicago. This was news to me, so if it's news to you, I don't know if it's news to you, but I think it's something that should be shared. Is everybody aware that that property changed hands on Friday?
No.
No.
I just heard that, and a developer bought it, and I think we should be prepared. Because I sure don't want to go back to what we went through 3 years ago. Maybe we will be.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
There's Pat Sullivan also has a hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my only concern is, and I'm in favor of, having a hospitality area and everything, so I'm not opposing it or saying, people aren't doing their job, but where I am confused is this concept of approving an overlay versus revising the zoning code, because there seems to be multiple understandings of that. So that gets a little concerning for me, because nobody is ever 100% right, as much as we'd like to think we are at times. So how do we resolve that? I mean, is there something that we're going to be looking into in more detail to understand? Because there's conflicting opinions about it. So that's where I get concerned, because I think that whatever we do should be what protects the town the most. So that's my only concern. Are these conflicting definitions, per se?
Thank you. Adelaide?
Hi, thanks. I didn't know if you guys got my letter today. Sorry, last minute. There's so much to say here. I'm not really sure where to begin, but I want to, I'll keep it brief and simple. First of all, I think what we're talking about in response to some of the things that Andrew said is the quality of the environmental due diligence. So, some people, and the seeker law has a lot of issues and, and vague terminology. And so it might be interpreted by different people differently, but it only takes one environmental impact. Can you guys hear me? It only takes one environmental impact to get a positive deck. And we know already from all the things that have been already said that there are numerous impacts and numerous environmental sensitivities on these properties. And my concern, and I wasn't really drawn into this process until I read the CAC letters, and I've said this before, but letters I had never seen that quality of. That, and they were written by, Margaret Schneibel, the chair, was on the CPRC committee. So it's not like this is big news. I mean, she knew what was going on, and these sites were not chosen by the CPRC in the survey. Only the Cottonwood was considered to be chosen. And so when I've been asking about Nan's responses to that CAC letter, her response was that the board chose those sites and the CAC was right. Only the Cottonwood had been chosen. So there are a lot of questions about why those were chosen, and maybe because they were older sites, but also we also know that developers are in the wings, that we also know people have come to they've been public about it. We know the hotelier from the city is talking to neighbors on College Lane. Let's just put it on the table. And the Cottonwood, the people that have come to the meetings and talked about what they wanted to do. And so that makes, I understand where there's a logic that here's something we want to bring back. The problem becomes when you jump from, and most people, by the way, did not want more than 20 rooms. I think 70, there's a letter from Howard Schuman that says like 70% of the people wanted like 4 to 10 rooms in that survey. So let's get that clear too about what the facts are about that. But I have recently stayed in a 40-room hotel, and it's a huge footprint, huge. I can't imagine, they would be disastrous on any of those sites, a 40-room hotel. So I have a real issue with that. But I think, I'm getting a little feedback here, but I hope that's not coming to you too. But anyway, I think that it's obvious that we need to do more due diligence. and hire professionals that can do that. Experts in hydrology, soils, wetlands, water. And that's what's missing here, the data. And I don't think you want to move ahead and create environmental disasters in the neighborhood. And by the way, when we were fighting Miggdale, those neighbors had 2 large law firms. These neighbors have no legal representation. Okay, so I'm trying to speak out here for the protection of the environment, but also for the neighbors and the public that do not come armed with a law firm, 2 of them. So, and in this situation, the neighbors really need one, because if you don't do the due diligence, who's going to protect the neighbors and the environment? I mean, if you keep saying we don't see this, it's not true. And I'm sorry, but nothing personal, but Nan going through the EAF and checking off boxes with the town board members, none of whom are environmental experts, not one. And most of you, I'm sorry, do not know a lot about the environmental issues that many of us have fought for many years here. So, and I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just saying there are experts and there are non-experts. And I would put all of you in the non-expert category when it comes to the environment and myself. So I would be hiring the right people to get the data. And I think that's really what I know, that you personally don't want to bring harm to people or make a bad decision. And I've just urged you, because I understand you want to get the decision over with. That's clear. But you have to understand, you guys have been dealing with this for 2 or 3 years, but the neighbors and the public have only been through a few public hearings in a few months. So we are just trying to, and we don't have the benefit of consultants with us behind the scenes explaining things or telling, or contriving narratives, and sometimes it feels that there are a lot of contrived narratives here because we don't have data. So all I can say is I think you need to step back, hire the right people, and not be in a hurry to do this. And I know that sounds to some people crazy because you've been doing this for a couple of years, but that doesn't mean, the length of time that took, had a lot of other factors going into it. So, but I think if we don't get process together, when other big projects come down the road, I'm worried about that. So what others said here about Miggdale project, big properties are coming on the road. If we don't have a process that's professionally driven and clear and reliable and completely transparent to the public, I'm not sure how we could safely grow the community in a way that's in compliance with the comp plan and protect the rural area that we all love. So I hope that was not more than you wanted to hear, but there you go. Thank you.
Anything else? We're here for just watching the time, and I want to get everyone's comments. Yes, please.
Unfortunately, there's not too many kids, but I thought I'd bring mine up. Hi, my name is Miriam. My husband, son, and I live on College Lane. Something that I'm sorry that I must have missed on your website is the traffic as far as how that's going to affect College Lane. So I'm just kind of curious where the trucks are going to be going back and forth, because obviously from the opposite side, it's too narrow. So I didn't see that on your website.
So we're not sort of having just taking your comments and questions, and then I can address after we summarize. But so I guess it's better for me to wait, because otherwise that way I'm uniform in how we're doing it. But there is no proposal before the town for that property to be able to tell you anything about traffic, and that would be coming from a traffic study that would have to be required according to our code.
Okay. So I think something that's really important to know is there's a lot of families and a lot of children that live on College Lane. And currently, right where the bridge is, it's only 26 feet apart from one side of the bridge to the other. And there's no sidewalk. So obviously, that's a huge concern for all of us parents. So there's also a bunch of kids that fish down there. So I think it's really important too for us to really understand the layout. And you mentioned that it's up on the website, but I haven't seen that. So just to kind of understand what the impact is going to be with the traffic, that's a huge concern. Because obviously from the other side, it's way too narrow. And if you have big trucks going up and down every day, you're also ruining 2 other households that live there.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Didn't want to say anything.
Brave guy.
Yeah, you did. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, someone else?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the mute button on my computer. It's Ilana Nielsen, and I've voiced a lot of my concerns, but the more I've been thinking about this project, there are a few other things that have really been standing out for me. First, just thinking of the area over by Bennett, that's actually, I don't know if I would call it historic, but when you're looking at a region where almost all of the houses are 150 years old or older, I think that is a historic consideration. But also for that area, I think it's important to consider the Bennett Monument. We all love the Bennett Monument, but there's a lot of confusion about how to drive around it. There've been a lot of accidents there, including some quite recently that were quite bad. And as that road becomes busier with the opening of the Bennett Park, I think that we need to consider that as well. The big thing that really has me baffled about this project, though, is why these parcels were chosen, especially, I mean, obviously the Cottonwood had a new owner, and that kind of makes sense that would be considered. But the other 2 parcels, especially if there isn't something in front of the boards, don't really make sense to me, especially if you're thinking about what is closest to the village and on major roads. There are all of these other major roads. I don't know why you would put everything in one area. So just as a short list, these are some of the houses that have been bed and breakfast that I know of that were not be expanded because of this zoning. So in other words, places that have acted as a bed and breakfast before but would not be increasing their business, wouldn't even be in the zoning overlay. And that would include the Cat in Your Lap, which is literally on the other side of where the zoning ends. John Tompkins property off of, I guess it's Old Route 82 there. Silverbrook Manor, the Millbrook Country House, Wings Castle. Basically anything that has acted as a small bed and breakfast before, or small inn before, would kind of not even be in the running for that. So then if you're thinking about things that become more of a destination, like destination weddings and conferences and things like that, anything that would have a larger gathering, it would make sense to me that you would consider places like Sandinona, or the winery, especially with all the barn weddings around. But then that also kind of goes back to this whole idea of agriturismo and agricultural based hospitality, which has been really important to this area. So just some of my ideas. I really am hoping that the town will not vote on this and keep this open a little bit longer while more people think about what they want. Once you do this, you can't really undo it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have one. I'd like to see a show of hands of the audience as to who supports this and who doesn't. Those in favor? Those against?
Well, I guess I'm confused what this is. This being the overlay, this being in general, the hospitality. I don't.
Okay, guys,
I'm
I'm
just-
sorry, this is not a discussion back and forth. You're welcome
Okay,
to
well,
make
my point
comments.
of view about this is that I think it's being pushed too fast. And to tell somebody to go to the Millbrook Town of Washington website is kind of like giving me a Yiddish newspaper. It's about that clear. You know,
It's convoluted and confusing.
Okay. Last call, we've been here for an hour and 10 minutes, and I want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak, but I want to keep things moving as well, so I can address some of your questions and comments. Okay, so do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
We should hold it over.
All in favor?
Repeatedly.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I think they're touching, they have to raise their hand or they can send it. Okay, so I think if it's helpful, I'll address some of the comments just so that everyone, I know that Nan and Jim spoke about how overlays work, but we have regulations in our code that address accessory structures, erosion and sediment, general site plan requirements, scenic road requirements, sign requirements, local law requirements, wetlands, swimming pools. I mean, the list goes on and on. I printed out one of them and it was, well, it's about this thick. And so I just bring that up to you because I just want to reemphasize, it was one of the residents had concerns, actually a couple, about traffic, others about septic, others about water. All of those things will be addressed by the planning board when there's a proposal before them where they actually know what they're looking at. So I think that's, at that time, and I think our former planning board chairman brought up things like, hydrologists, traffic, all those things are absolutely 100% should be done by the planning board once they know what's in front of them. So I just wanted to just let everyone know that all of those issues will be evaluated by experts, hydrologists, traffic, lighting, all of those things. This is just adding another layer of allowance, right? Because, by the way, people could be applying right now for a special use permit for the Cottonwood or for Daytop. Here we're giving parameters. Sorry, the public hearing is
No, I was
closed.
just asking a question.
For the hotel, for a hotel.
What kind of a special permit?
They can apply for a special use permit right now.
No, they can't.
Yes, they can. You can advise that. Okay, that's what I
No,
would
but
advise.
It requires pre-existing non-conforming.
Exactly.
Unit day is elapsed.
Yeah,
After
I got
unit
it,
day-
but one of them is actually happening. And the other, but they would be able to take, anyway, I'm not gonna get into.
Okay, wait.
I-
Hold it.
So let me just
The
get into
public
something.
hearing's been
Public
closed.
hearing is closed.
No,
we did. We just closed the public hearing.
you didn't vote on it.
We did vote.
I just
on
made a
it.
motion.
We did.
Voted.
We voted on
I'm
it.
sorry, this is not how we are, we have a process. Thank you. That's,
Something's happening. We should-
No, you don't have a process. You didn't vote on it. Nobody heard the vote.
do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Yes, you do.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so, another thing was, I think it's important also to note.
The public hearing's closed.
But if something's happening, we should.
You're welcome to stay.
You're welcome
to stay or addressing some of
We're going to address your questions, and I can ask Jim Stout to clarify. So there was a question earlier, if we could all just, I'm going to get to the village's comments too. If we could all just be respectful of our speaking. Couple other questions on rooms. I think it's really important for everyone to understand that the way the code is written says up to 20, up to 40 for adaptive historic reuse. It doesn't preclude any of those applicants, should there be applicants, from having to establish setbacks, location near water, traffic, all of the other issues. So it's not saying that 40 rooms goes here, 40 rooms goes here, and 20 rooms go there. All of the issues, including the septic issues, traffic issues, would have to be determined by the planning board about what they're allowed to do there with the size once they know what proposal is before them.
If I make a bid and it's rejected by the planning board, why can't I go back to your forms that say there's no environmental impact and say they report to the
Okay,
planning board?
sorry, we're not, We're not.
That's a good question.
I'm,
I know you don't want to answer questions, but it's a one-way conversation.
well, no, we heard you. This is how we've been advised by our lawyer that how public hearings work best. I would also like to point out.
Well, maybe your lawyer
someone
doesn't know the
mentioned-
community.
None of us are experts in this room is absolutely correct, which is why we'd be required to hire them on behalf of the town for a project, and the applicant would be required to hire them as well. But I think it's really important to emphasize that none of us here are either, and we have retained an attorney, meaning the board, we're not experts, we're not hydrologists. So a lot of this is conjecture. And we have retained an attorney who has over 30 years of zoning and planning experience. And Nan, while yes, she's a planner, she's a planner with an environmental focus who is widely respected for her environmental planning throughout New York State. And I encourage all of you to read her CV. I read it for everybody at the beginning of the public hearing we had four times ago to address that, just to sort of set the table for everyone so they know who is advising the town. We are not being advised by people that don't know what they're doing. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The location of these areas, which is all 3 areas that are under one overlay, and that's the other important piece. We have to write the law so it applies to all 3 spots. So when we say up to 20 rooms, that's a new build on any of those 3 spots. It doesn't mean that 20 rooms is going across from Bennett Commons. There might only be able to have 5 rooms there. Who knows? It's just up to what could be allowed should they meet all of the other requirements. The statistics. One of our funders, there were 2 people who were donated to the town, one of whom had a statistician look at this issue, because if you recall, before
Privately funded?
we had
The comp plan was privately funded?
No. The study, 2 people in the town donated to the town.
Do they have an interest in any of the projects?
No, they do not, Susan. And they're very well-regarded, well-respected members of our community. Yes. 2 foundations in
They have
town.
interest in any of the projects. So
Sorry, I really don't want to have that kind of back and forth. But one of them, because it was a big question that came up when we were adopting the addendum to the comprehensive plan. And they had their statistician at their business look at this survey, and they said it has a 97% accuracy in terms of the response rate. In fact, Nan can tell you, Nan, if you want to chime in, that you've never seen a response rate as great for a town of our size. So we're doing the best that we can, and we did do, and had a great committee that was put together representing a lot of different viewpoints in our town that came together, hired these experts, wrote this report, and gave the community a lot of opportunities to have feedback. Couple other things. College Lane, you all mentioned the traffic on College Lane. We included in the resolution, after your feedback from the public hearing in the fall, to make sure that the main entrance is on 343, so that there would, 82, I get those confused there. So that there would not be cars and things coming in and out. There may be deliveries, just like there would be if it were a home or something else. I wanted to also clarify, there are no proposals before the town.
What's the difference, I'm sorry, the difference between a delivery, because the delivery trucks are what we're concerned about.
Yeah, well, you would have a delivery truck there if you, well, no one have, but you would have a delivery truck. You'd have UPS, you would have,
Fuel.
or, right. Well, these are the things that would have to be traffic studies if there's a proposal there. I'll let you know, from what we understand, the person that was interested in that property has walked away from it and it's going back on the market. So, it could be a whole host of different things. Maybe it'll be a home. So, for the record on that, as far as the Cottonwood, we are aware, obviously, as everyone in this room has mentioned, there's a family who's purchased it. They'd like to rehab it and make it look terrific and provide hospitality for our town. So those are the only projects that we know of, one being gone and one that we understand, although there's no proposals before the town at this time. So other things I just wanted to look at, and this was a comment from Jim Stout to me reading some of the letters and other comments that come in, is our laws are replete with provisions that protect the very natural resources being identified, including the natural resources inventory, which will be adopted, hopefully, if this law is adopted. And of course, if and when applications come in, specific site issues and proposals can be identified under the protection of the provisions of the law. So the village sent a letter, or the village, Tim Colby, our mayor, the village's mayor, came to speak at our meeting on the 29th of April to share that the village had concerns about the Halcyon Road sewer and septic, a riparian area and aquifer that runs under Route 43 into the stream that goes into Bennett Park and into Thorndale, and concerns about flooding and washout. So we reviewed all those concerns with Nan and with Jim Stout. And we thank you, by the way, for your comments. But in reviewing it all with them, they said that in order to know whether there is a relationship between the aquifer, stream, and pond having any impact on downstream properties can only be determined by hydrological study, which would be required should any development be proposed there. To state that there is a relationship or any threat or even any flooding risk without such a study is conjecture, meaning just a statement without supported by facts. I also wanted to show you, because and Mike has this, he can show this to you, but here's the water map here, right? And so this is the area that has this is an area here. All of Bennett Commons, the condo complex, sits right on top of this water on that side too. So, and they've gone through all of the septic and all of the, they went through all the protections when they applied to do that. And that sits right on top there. This yellow area here, which through our NRI, we were able to identify not just, and keep in mind too, the village's aquifer has its own protection regulations, right, and own laws. And this yellow line, which goes all the way over here, that's all of the area where the water runoff actually feeds into the aquifer that provides the water to the village. So this is nowhere near the area that is near any of the village's water. People that have wells here might be near here, but again, there's this aquifer, their aquifer that runs all the way under Alden Terrace, all the way under the high school. Most of the village is under part of this or this aquifer. So while I appreciate, again, it's really until there's a hydrological study, once we know if anybody even wants to do anything there, you can't really make any kind of determination, according to Nan, that there'd be any impact at all until you know what is being proposed and what could take place. So that was our response to the village. We wanted to give it to you in person because we assumed you would be here.
Yeah, it's a risk of unknowns.
Yeah, and I hope that's helpful. And Mike has this map if he can show that to you. So part 2 of seeker we reviewed on April 29th. Have you had a chance to review the revised part 2 that Nan submitted?
Yeah.
Which was also on the website. Does the board have any questions or comments on that?
No, I do not.
And then part 3 she drafted, which is in your packet, which is a negative declaration.
Yep.
And I just want to confirm that all of you have reviewed that part 3
Yes.
neg deck.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments?
No.
Jim, Nan, is there anything on your end that about any of the part 3, or if there's no comments? I know we've had it, we've reviewed it.
I think it's better to talk about it, even though the part 3 and the draft neg deck are in a way one. I think it's better to talk about it as you have your part 2, and if you intend to proceed with the part 2 as you have directed it be drafted, then you would start there and have a resolution to issue that. You have a part 3 and a draft negative declaration. If you intended to proceed with those, you would then have a resolution to adopt the part 3 and to adopt the negative declaration. And sort of as almost as 3 documents.
Okay, so I'm having a little hard time hearing you, Jimmy. So before we move on to the part 3 neg deck, you would suggest that we make a motion to adopt part 2?
If you intend to do it, you would start with a motion, if that's your intention, to issue the part 2 that you have before you. That would be step 1.
What is everyone's feeling about that? Part
So
2?
we went over part 2, like the
Yes.
last.
Right.
We're
Yes, and
fine
then Nan
with-
made the
we're fine
corrections
with
because
it.
there were some things
Yeah.
that we wanted to make, we noted, we feel like we had
Yep.
a minimal impact or would have some impact.
Mhm.
Okay, do I have a motion to adopt part 2?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Part 3,
So now you would move into part 3 and the negative declaration. And it would be the same process if it is your desire as board to adopt the part 3 and the negative declaration. You would have before you the draft. You would take a motion to do so.
okay, do I have a motion to adopt part 3 and the negative declaration?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So now you're up to the law. You have a draft resolution before you on the law.
Yes.
And you're free to consider the law, and if you choose to adopt it, you can do so.
Yeah.
Adopt that resolution, which adopts the law.
Wow.
Yes. And I also wanted to mention in the resolution, just for the benefit for those here for the public hearing and those on Zoom, you go into great detail discussing, walking through that how our code and protections continue to apply. That's emphasized in this resolution. Have you had a chance to review it?
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to adopt the resolution
Okay.
for the hospitality overlay.
I'll second.
Do I need to read all of that into the record?
So
Jim?
you have the resolution before you. So
Yeah.
you are making a motion to adopt the resolution you have before you, which provides for the adoption of the law. That is sufficient.
Okay, so.
Okay,
that's
do I
sufficient.
have
We don't need to-
a motion to adopt the resolution? Did you second that?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anything else on the agenda?
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Can I ask just one question? Is it